The first crack of the rifle shot tore through the velvet silence of the Nebraska night. It wasn't a sound of violence, but of warning. My name is Elias, and at 24, I'm the reluctant heir to a legacy of dirt and dew. The Shaw acreage isn't a commercial operation. It's a stubborn, beautiful patch of earth my great-grandfather claimed, a promise we've kept for generations. My parents see me as the next keeper of that promise. I see the wide world beyond the sea of corn that rustles at the edge of our property, and I dream of something else, especially after last summer. My parents were in Omaha, celebrating their anniversary, leaving me in charge of the farm and my two younger sisters, Chloe and Maya. The isolation was usually a comfort, a blanket of privacy. But that night, as a three-quarter moon rose, the solitude felt less like peace and more like exposure. It was late. Chloe was in her room, her face lit by the blue glow of her online summer course. Maya and I were adrift on the living room couch, laughing at some forgettable TV show, both of us counting the days until we could leave this quiet life behind. The only chore we all dreaded was the possibility of predators, not just coyotes, but the two-legged kind. It's a sad fact of rural life. Sometimes people see a lonely farm as an opportunity. The dogs, two hulking shepherds named Duke and Baron, started first. Their barking wasn't the usual yapping at a stray possum. This was a deep, guttural frenzy, all focused on the dark wall of the cornfield. I went out onto the back porch, the wooden boards cool under my bare feet. "Quiet," I yelled. They fell silent for a breath, ears pricked, bodies tense. That's when I heard it, a clear, piercing whistle from deep within the corn. Human, deliberate. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I hurried back inside, straight to the locked cabinet, and pulled out my dad's old Winchester. My sisters saw the look on my face, and their laughter died. "Someone's in the north field," I said. They immediately told me I was insane if I thought I was going out there. They were right. The sense knocked back into me. I went back to the porch, raised the rifle, and fired a single shot into the air. The report was enormous, shattering the night. "Get off our land," I roared, my voice sounding strangely small after the gunshot. For a moment, I felt a surge of power. We went back inside, the three of us trying to laugh off the jitters. But the dogs started again, even more frantic than before. I looked out the window, and my blood went cold. A man stood just at the tree line, maybe 20 yards from the house, staring right at me. He was just a silhouette against the dark green. I slammed open the door and screamed, "Hey!" He didn't flinch. He just turned and melted back into the corn. I didn't chase him. I unchained the dogs and brought them inside, their low growls rumbling through the house. We eventually went to bed, each of us taking a dog for comfort. I left my window open, the screen letting in the humid air. I was trying to focus on a movie when I heard it again. That same tuneless whistle right outside. I crept to the window, and there he was. He was walking through the backyard, slow and casual, like he was on a Sunday stroll. Then he stopped. As if he felt my gaze, he turned his head and looked directly up at my window, never breaking his whistle. Rage flooded me. This wasn't just trespassing, it was a performance. He was trying to scare us. I grabbed the Winchester from my bed, aimed carefully at a patch of grass a few feet to his left, and fired. Dirt kicked up. The whistling cut off. He flinched violently, then turned and sprinted around the front of the house, disappearing from view. He didn't come back. We never found out who he was. A drunk? A kid trying to be funny? Or something far more dangerous? I don't know, but I do know that night cemented something for me. This land, for all its beauty, comes with a weight and isolation I'm not sure I can carry. My parents see a legacy. I see the dark edge of a cornfield and the sound of a stranger's whistle in the dead of night. The silence of a remote farm after midnight is a heavy, living thing. It's a blanket you can feel, and that's why the first sound didn't just startle me. It tore that silence in two. It was the summer of 2020, and I was earning some extra cash watching my Uncle Elias's sheep farm in the rolling hills of West Virginia, while he and my aunt were visiting my cousin out of state. The third night was my last. I was in the den, scrolling on my phone, when a sound cut through the double-paned windows, a sharp, metallic clang from the direction of the main equipment shed. I sat up, my heart doing a single, hard thump against my ribs. Probably a raccoon, I told myself, trying to swallow the sudden dryness in my throat. They're always getting into something. But raccoons don't use tools. The thought was unbidden, chilling. I hadn't seen a raccoon. I'd just assumed. The sound had a weight to it, an intentionality that a scavenging animal couldn't muster. I muted the TV, my ears straining against the quiet. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then a low, distressed bleat from the far pasture. Then another. And then, not one by one, but as a single, rising chorus of pure panic, the entire flock began to cry out. Something was very, very wrong. My uncle's words echoed in my head. The sheep are your first alarm. You ignore them. You ignore a problem. My job was to be the solution. I went to the mudroom, pulling on my boots and a heavy jacket, my hands trembling slightly as I zipped it up. Just as my fingers touched the cold brass of the door handle, a sound froze me solid. It was a sheep's cry, but shredded, distorted into a high, wet gurgle that was cut off with a finality that made my stomach lurch. Something was being killed out there. I didn't run to the door. I ran to the locked cabinet in my uncle's study. The key was hidden in a dusty old tobacco tin on the shelf. Inside the cabinet was a weathered 12-gauge shotgun and a box of shells. I fumbled one, the brass shell clattering on the hardwood floor, before I managed to pump a round into the chamber. The frantic bleeding had stopped. The silence that replaced it was somehow worse. I stepped out into the damp night air, the shotgun heavy and foreign in my hands. The motion-activated floodlights on the barn were on, casting long, distorted shadows. The main pen was empty, the gates swinging open. They were all gone. A cold dread seeped in my bones. I walked past the empty pen, towards the dark outline of the shearing shed. That's when I heard it. Not talking, but a low, rhythmic humming. It was barely audible, a vibration more than a sound, like a beehive buried in the earth. It seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. I had enough. I raised the shotgun toward the starry sky and fired. The blast was monstrous, shattering the night. The humming stopped instantly, and that's when the whispers started. They weren't from one direction. They swirled around me on the breeze, soft, sibilant sounds that I couldn't quite make out. I spun around, the barrel of the shotgun tracing arcs in the darkness, but there was nothing to see. I knew I had to move. I started towards the tree line at the edge of the property, where the pasture met the woods. With every step, the whispers seemed to grow closer, more distinct, though the words remained a maddening jumble. I could hear footsteps now, too, not following me, but moving parallel to me in the high grass, just beyond the reach of the barn's light. I stopped, my breath catching in my chest. Down one of the rows between the apple trees, a figure stood perfectly still. It was tall and wore what looked like a long, dark, tattered coat. Its face was in shadow. I raised the shotgun, my voice a cracked scream telling it to get off the property. It didn't move. I fired a second shot into the air, the recoil jar in my shoulder. The figure didn't even flinch. Instead, it began to walk towards me, not with a threat, but with a slow, deliberate grace that was utterly terrifying. And as it moved into a patch of faint moonlight, I saw its face wasn't in shadow. It was smooth, pale, and utterly featureless, like polished river stone. My blood ran cold. I took a step back and my boot knocked against something. I glanced down for half a second. It was a sheep's fleece, perfectly skinned and laid out flat on the ground like a rug. It was still wet. When I looked up, they were everywhere. Figures in dark, tattered clothes emerged from between the trees, from behind the tractor, from the shadows of the shed. All with those same smooth, blank faces. They stood silently, forming a loose circle around me. The whispering had stopped. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. I broke. I didn't fire. I just ran, crashing through the apple orchard, thorns tearing at my jacket, not caring about the direction, only caring about a way. I didn't stop until the lights of the farmhouse were behind me, and I collapsed, gasping, behind the cover of the old stone well. I waited there for what felt like an hour, listening. I heard nothing. No footsteps, no whispers. Just the normal sounds of the night. Cautiously, I crept back towards the house, my eyes scanning every shadow. I made it to the back porch steps and saw it. Sitting on the top step, as if left for me, was a single, freshly shorn sheep's hoof. It was clean, almost pristine, and placed neatly on a small square of white cloth. I didn't vomit. I didn't scream. I just felt a deep, fundamental horror that I knew would never leave me. I stumbled inside, deadbolted the door, and called 911. The deputy who arrived was kind, but skeptical. He found the open gate, the empty pen. He found the fleece. He never found the hoof I described. It was gone when we looked. There were no footprints, no signs of a struggle beyond the scattered sheep. He wrote it up as a possible predator attack, and trespassing promised to increase patrols. My parents came and got me. We didn't speak much on the long drive home. Uncle Elias installed a whole network of cameras and powerful spotlights when he returned. He called me a week later. His voice was strained. He said the sheep had all wandered back over the next 2 days, seemingly unharmed. But they weren't the same, he said. They wouldn't eat. They just stood in a tight group in the center of the pasture, perfectly still, all facing the same direction, towards the trees. And every night, just after midnight, the motion sensors on the eastern floodlights trigger, turning them on for exactly 3 minutes. The cameras show nothing but empty field. The last sliver of crimson sun dipped below the endless horizon of our Montana ranch, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and orange. Eliza and I, Jack, sat on the porch swing, sipping sweet tea and listening to the crickets begin their nightly symphony. Out here, the silence is a presence itself, a thick blanket that settles over the miles of wheat fields separating us from the nearest town. Our only light was the soft glow from the kitchen window. The first sound wasn't a knock, but a long, slow scrape against the side of the house, like a branch being dragged along the clapboard siding. We both fell silent, listening. Probably just that old pine branch finally giving way. I said, more to reassure myself than Eliza. She didn't answer, her body rigid beside mine. A moment later, it came again. But this time, it was followed by a soft, rhythmic thumping from around back, near the generator shed. Thump, 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 like a fist gently pounding on heavy canvas. Eliza's hand found mine, her grip cold and tight. "Jack," she whispered, "that's not the wind." Before I could answer, the baby monitor on the small table between us, which was tuned to our bedroom where our old Labrador, Gus, was sleeping, crackled to life with a low, guttural growl. We never heard Gus growl. He was 12 years old and friendly to a fault. The sound was so foreign, so menacing, that it froze the blood in my veins. The thumping outside stopped abruptly, as if in response to the noise from inside. Then new sound, from the direction of our long, gravel driveway. A single, clear note rang out through the stillness. A high metallic ping, then another, and another. It was the sound of someone slowly, deliberately, stepping on the loose piece of corrugated tin I'd left by the gate. A sound I knew better than my own heartbeat. Ping, ping, ping. It was moving closer. I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Stay here," I told Eliza, my voice a hoarse whisper. I crept to the edge of the porch and peered into the deepening gloom. The driveway was empty. The pinging had stopped. As I turned back to Eliza, the motion-activated security light above the barn, 100 yards away, flared to life, flooding the yard with a stark, white glare. The barn door was wide open. I'd secured it shut with a heavy bolt before dinner. And standing just inside the threshold, illuminated like an actor on a stage, was a figure. It was tall and impossibly thin, silhouetted against the dark interior of the barn. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, facing the house. I stumbled back into Eliza, pointing a trembling finger. She saw it too, and a small, terrified sound escaped her lips. As we watched, the figure took one slow, deliberate step backward, melting into the shadows of the barn just as the light, on its timer, clicked off again, plunging everything back into darkness. We scrambled inside, locking the solid oak door behind us. I grabbed the rifle from above the mantel, my hand shaking so badly I could barely check the chamber. Eliza called 911, her voice a frantic tremor as she explained to the dispatcher that someone was on our property. The response time, she was told, was 45 minutes. We stood in the dark living room, listening. The silence was worse than the sounds. It was a waiting silence. Then from the baby monitor we heard a new sound, the soft, rhythmic creak of the rocking chair in the nursery upstairs. It was empty. It had been empty for years. Back and forth, back and forth. A slow, peaceful rhythm that was utterly horrifying. A sudden, frantic scratching start at the back door, followed by a low whine. It was Gus. He must have slipped out of the bedroom and downstairs. Relief washed over me. It's just the dog. I breathed, lowering the rifle and moving to let him in. Jack, no. Eliza hissed, but it was too late. I turned the deadbolt and pulled the door open. There was no dog. The porch was empty. The scratching had stopped. And lying neatly in the center of the welcome mat was Gus's worn leather collar, the metal name tag glinting in the moonlight. I slammed the door shut and relocked it, my breath coming in ragged gasps. We retreated to the center of the room, back to back, with nowhere left to run. We must have stood there for an eternity, until the distant wail of a siren finally cut through the night. The sheriff's deputy was thorough, his flashlight beam cutting across the yard and into the open barn. He found nothing. No footprints in the soft dirt around the house. No signs of forced entry. The barn bolt was still securely fastened, he said. The collar was gone from the mat. He left us with a shrug and a recommendation to get a security system, his tires crunching on the gravel as he drove away. We are sitting in the kitchen now, every light in the house blazing. The rifle is on the table between us. We haven't spoken. The fear has hardened into a cold, heavy stone in my gut. Because just before the deputy arrived, while we were still locked inside, the rocking chair upstairs fell silent. And in the perfect quiet, we both heard it clearly. The gentle, almost silent pad, pad, pad of paws walking down the hallway upstairs, and the faint, familiar jingle of a dog's tags.